Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and senior editor at AutoFin Journal and Subprime Auto Finance News. In today's webinar, smart strategies for vehicle acquisition mid and post-pandemic, we're going to have a great session in store featuring Nick Gerlach, who is the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer. But before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for today's session. We are recording today's webinar, and we'll make the recording available to you as quickly as possible. So keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link. You will be in listen-only mode for our session today. We will reserve some time after Nick's presentation for a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time using the chat function here on the Zoom platform. So enough from this, Nick. Let's get to the Nick who is the star of our webinar. Nick Gerlach from CarOffer. Take it away, sir.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to star of the webinar, but thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. So as Nick mentioned, and we'll try not to confuse you too much with having two Nicks on the webinar here, but my name is Nick Gerlach. I'm the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer. For those of you that are not familiar with us, we call ourselves an instant trade platform. What we're basically doing is we're brokering wholesale transactions between buyers and sellers. Our buyers and sellers happen to be car dealers. And so what I've been asked to talk about today are basically some smart strategies for vehicle acquisition, both mid and post-pandemic. I'm excited to do so. We're certainly in the middle of a lot of them right now. And so I hope I can provide some interesting insight for you. So like any good presentation geared towards a group of car enthusiasts, car buyers, et cetera, I'm going to start with the baseball analogy. And so we're going to talk just briefly about Barry Bonds. So if you take a look at the image to the right, you'll see Barry Bonds, number 25. And I imagine if I asked you the question, do you remember when he broke the record? I'd get a bunch of, oh, absolutely. You know, a lot of different opinions on how people feel about that. But my guess is that you'd probably think of 2001 when Barry Bonds broke the single season, home run record, hitting 73 home runs, breaking the record that was previously set by Mark McGwire not too many years ahead of that. And so you'd be surprised, though, I bet, to know that that's not the record I'm talking about. I'm talking about 2004 when Barry Bonds did something else that was pretty interesting, in my opinion. And he broke the single season record for on-base percentage, landing himself on base 60.9% of the time that he went up to the plate. And what's maybe even most impressive about that is he ended up with 232 walks that season. So really phenomenal year for Barry Bonds, one that certainly led to a great contribution. He ended up being the MVP that season as well. But one of his records that certainly isn't as talked about is the home run record. So I bring that up because what we're going to talk about today, inventory acquisition, and then just basic inventory decisions, right? Sometimes they're not sexy, right? Kind of like Barry Bonds' 2004 year, having 232 walks isn't necessarily sexy, but it gets the job done. And so with that in mind, we'll move forward. So I think, though, to talk about the plan that we want to have in place, we have to understand the market that we're in today. And so we are in, I don't have to tell anyone that's listening to this call, we are in a time of unprecedented volatility in vehicle values, both wholesale and retail values for used vehicles. And so I'm going to use a number of Blackbook charts in this presentation. If you don't, they have some phenomenal data and some phenomenal market insights that you can find. I highly recommend them. But what we're going to talk about today is just what we've seen since the onset of the pandemic. This particular chart looks at 2 to 8 year old vehicles, and specifically it's tracking week over week price changes, meaning value changes in the wholesale market. It starts in January of 2020, but you can see the effect of the pandemic on or around March 15th, you see that immediate drop in values. By the way, a dot below the red line would indicate that vehicle values are moving down. Meanwhile, a plotted a dot above the red line, so to speak, would indicate the values are moving up, and you can see 1.75% a week, 2% a week, et cetera. But you can see that sharp decrease or decline in values, followed by a rapid increase, right? And then a pretty long consecutive period of time where values right about here start to decline, and then back up to where we are today, which we're in a market that's as hot as can be. And so as a used car operator, it's obviously a challenging thing to navigate, right? And no surprise as to why we find ourselves here. What we're looking at today, this is another Black Book chart. It's their retail listing volume index. Basically what it's tracking is the number of used cars that are listed on dealer websites indexed to the first of the year. So one way to think of this is right now today, you look at week 23 of the year, we're sitting with about, 87% of what we had on our lots January 1st. And so for a lot of reasons, whether it's what's happened to the new car supply, right? Certainly with the microchip shortage, foam, et cetera, a number of other products needed to manufacture the new cars. With the shortage in that has obviously created the issue where manufacturers are having to either shut down supply altogether or slow down supply substantially, which has caused the manufacturers to lean on, or I should say, support first their franchise dealers, as they should. And so any available inventory they do have has shifted to those franchise stores. But what it's caused is it's caused them to cut out some other key buyers, so to speak. So think of like the rental car companies. Now, those rental car companies still have had a pretty tremendous demand. They still have to continue to operate. So it's caused those rental car agencies or companies to shift that demand to the used car market. Meanwhile, with the shortage of new cars on franchise dealer lots, there's been intense increase in demand from the franchise dealers, right, which has caused that heating up of the market, which leads us to where we are today, which is if you look at the wholesale weekly price index, and you look at, again, this is similar to the last chart, index to the first of the year, where we find ourselves today is that same car in aggregate on average that was worth, on January 1st money, let's look at it that way, is worth about 33% more today, according to Black Book. I saw another article from J.D. Power just yesterday that appeared, a graph in Automotive News that showed an even higher statistic than that. So really, really interesting, crazy, wild times. But you think about the implications of this tells you, or this means that the car that was $20,000, it was worth $20,000 wholesale on January 1st, is worth $26,600 in today's money. And so all in less than 6 months time. Really, really incredible, making it very tough to navigate. So what dealers are finding themselves in today, in my opinion, is they're finding themselves in this vicious cycle, right? Where both new and used inventory is in such short supply that what it's done is that lower inventory level has led those dealers to have to lean on more heavily than they traditionally have, whether it's a wholesale platform or an auction, to keep their lot stocked. And so the challenge is, though, right now with, again, those same dealers are being tight-fisted with the cars that they do have, because it's so hard to find them, that they're struggling to find quality inventory. And they're finding themselves compromising in a number of ways, whether it's compromising on the quality of the car that they're buying at auction, typically seeing, buying a car that they would not have typically bought, needing more recon, et cetera, than they traditionally would have, or perhaps it's compromising on a car that's not within their core inventory. We'll actually talk more about core inventory here in a little bit. Or then lastly, which is even worse and has certainly happened with some dealers, at least at some period, part of this value increase, some of them are sitting on the sidelines altogether. So what this has led to is the guys that are actually sitting at the desk, right, making the decisions for the dealerships, they've got to try to find a way to make money, and it's led them to hunt for profit in ways that are not good for the store. whether it's holding on trades, as we know, which will ultimately cause a missed sale, or it won't feed the beast, so to speak, and won't keep that trade-in flow coming in, right? And so it's led to a really interesting dilemma. And there's that moment with some dealers that I hope you never get to, but some certainly do, where dealers are so low in inventory. In fact, I talked to a guy just a week ago. The guy had 2 new cars sitting on his lot for the first time. This is a guy that traditionally stocked 100 new cars at any point in time, and he had 30 used cars. Again, same thing. He's traditionally got 80 to 100 used cars. He's a one-to-one dealer. And so he is sitting in a position where he's so low on inventory that he does what I call panic purchases at auction. And that's the worst kind, right? Because you make all the wrong decisions. You need cars so fast, so quickly right now that you'll just take anything, right? It doesn't matter if it's the right car for your store, if it's the right condition, right? You just need something because the shelves can't be bare. And so, but then they find themselves in that same position where they go to those sources and they can't find the supply. So it's a really, really interesting challenge that dealers are faced with right now. So the goal today is just to talk through some strategies from a high level to get you back in the driver's seat. So again, avoid the temptation to do what I call panic purchase. But when you do make those purchasing decisions, you still need to make them in this market and in every market. But we want to use smart strategies to do that, focusing on our core inventory, first understanding what that even is. And then once we do have that basic understanding of our core inventory, understanding how many of those types of cars I need to keep in stock. That's not to say we don't want to still make bets. In fact, when you make a good bet, it helps you grow. But that's the key thing, is we want to make sure it's a good bet. So we're going to talk about how you can speculate and buy cars outside of your core inventory and still make good, sound decisions. Third, we want to talk about making sure you're buying with the exit in mind, like any good used car operator should. And then lastly, it gets a heck of a lot easier if you can just win those trades. So we're going to talk about the multiplier effect and what that can do to your business, and what I call the trade-in multiplier. We're going to briefly just touch on pricing in a market that's on the rise. It's been an interesting topic of discussion right now, for sure. And so it's something that I want to hit on just briefly. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some of those basic inventory decisions in terms of routinely turning over your inventory. And then lastly, making the best use of your funding, your limited funding, whether it be cash or floor plan. You want to make sure you're making the most out of that. So, which takes us to my next point, which is you can't sell what you don't have. So I'll give you a bad analogy, but imagine you walk into a grocery store and you go to the bread aisle and you look to the shelves and there's no bread. Well, you came to the store, you wanted bread, you needed bread, or whatever the case may be. My gut tells me what most people do is they turn around, they walk to their car, they go to the guy down the street, and they buy bread. Well, so obviously that owner operator of that first grocery store that missed the sale of selling bread to you, right? He has an inventory problem at that moment, right? He had a customer that was a willing customer that came into their store that wanted to buy something that he didn't have. And so what's critical, obviously, is that guy's got to make sure he makes a good decision. Just because he's got a bare shelf, that doesn't mean that he should all of a sudden just start trying to fill it, right? If he all of a sudden said, okay, you know what, I've got these bare shelves, there's a bread shortage, I can't find bread anywhere right now. Or it's hard for me to find bread, let's put it that way. I'm not going to go ahead and put a tire rack where those shelves go and start carrying tires, because I know that my customer that walks into my store comes to buy bread from me. So it's an important thing that I want to say, because we want to think through the lens of this as we talk about our next topic. We shouldn't buy what you can't sell. And so, which leads us really, really nicely into our acquisition strategy section, which is talking, and we're going to talk first about our core inventory. So to really understand core inventory, we need to hit on that first point that I was just making. These are the cars, your core cars. These are the core cars that, based on history at your store, those customers walk in the door into your building and expect to buy and want to buy, right? And it is tailored to you uniquely. It is based on sales history. These are cars that, based on that sales history, you either sell the fastest, right, have the lowest average turn rate, and or generate the highest profits for your store based on historical data. You'll see an example here to the right, as this is a Toyota store. No surprise, near the top of that list, this is analyzing sales history. You'll see a 2017 Toyota Highlander. It'll tell you year, make, model, average cost, average profit, margin as a percentage, how quickly they're turning that car, what percentage of pre-owned sales that car represents, and then how many they sold within a given time period. And so an important point to make is if you think about this Highlander and this particular dealer, if he sells 16 a month, well, if all of a sudden he looks at his inventory and he wants to reconcile to that 16, but he finds that he only has 2, he's got 14 cars that he's not likely to sell that month, at least based on prior performance. So we need to understand on a monthly basis what sells, what generates the highest profit, what turns the fastest, and then lastly, reconcile to that target day supply of sales based on whatever assumption you want to make, whether it's 30 days, 45 days inventory that you want to keep in stock at all times. It's really up to you. It's your unique location, but we need to have that understanding. That core inventory, these are the cars that you can't get enough of, right? And so if you've ever stood in a lane and stood across from a guy that you go, how is he paying that for that car? If he's a good, smart operator, he knows something probably that you don't at that time, is what my gut tells me. And so whether it's that car is a car that sells phenomenally well at his store, he knows he can sell it, he knows it'll perform well, and he's got a need, well, then that's a car that you'll absolutely pay up for. And so which is the basic strategy behind your core inventory. Now, that's not to say that you don't want to occasionally speculate. And so when you take on risk, what you do is you grow, both in terms of size of your operation, your market share, et cetera. But the key is you want to make sure you're making good, smart bets. And so my recommendation to you is to start first by looking at market data. Everything that we do from an acquisition strategy standpoint should be founded based on data. And so start with what sells in your market. You should be looking at sales records in your market, market supply statistics, market turn times to see what's in low supply, what turns quickly. There are a number of different platforms that provide stuff like this. Ours certainly does. We actually have all this stuff as an example. But that is going to give you a good foundation to where you go, if I want to speculate and buy something that's not in my core inventory, what would that be? Where might I find it? I would start here is what I'm telling you. Secondly, I may want to look at what my competitors are selling. So I may want to look at the guy down the street and that I compete with directly and see if all of a sudden he starts stocking something that is not a trade that he's going out and buying, and it's performing well. So these can be great tools for you to use, and these registrations can be obtained through the DMV or through platforms like ours as well. So, and then lastly, you want to look for what buyers in your market are searching for. If I'm going to make a bet, I want to bet on what people are looking for. So I'll give you a bad example, but this is the Amazon top seller strategy. If you look to the right, on the right-hand side of the slide here, you'll see the top 100 Amazon searches in the U.S. This is not recent. This is something from a while ago. But if I wanted to open an Amazon business and begin to sell cars on Amazon, this might be where I'd start. I want to know what actually are people looking for on Amazon. Well, it's the same exact approach in your market. If you want to speculate and buy a car that is not currently in your core inventory, say you're the Toyota store, it's all the Toyotas, whatever the case may be. You want to speculate and you want to buy something outside it. Well, I'd love to know how many times that vehicle's been searched for. Again, using some of the big listing sites, that's something that a number of platforms provide. Again, ours does as well. So now to my third point, when making that purchase, and this is something that gets lost right now. A lot of people think that, okay, these guys that are buying today, they're just making decisions, they're leaving their hand in the air like they don't even care, right? So that's not necessarily true, because there are some assumptions that are being made And here are just a handful of them that you as an operator need to be making anytime you're making a buying decision. But you need to first start with what you think that vehicle retails for. Now, that's a difficult thing to do in this market, right? Because first, the market is on an incline. Likewise, in some markets, the market will decline. But you want to look at, you want to make an assumption about what you think that vehicle is likely to do from an appreciation rate on a weekly basis. So think of it this way. I buy a car at an auction or on a digital platform. It's going to take 2-3 weeks, 2 weeks to get to me, let's say. But once I get it here, I've got to put it through my shop. Let's call that another week. So it's likely 3 weeks until that car sells. When I'm setting my target retail price, I need to factor in, I need to have some assumptions that I'm making on a weekly basis based on what direction I think the market's headed in. These things are pretty easy to find. Again, I mentioned I plugged Black Book earlier. All the major valuation guides have them. Black Book's got a great market insight report that you can look at. But this will help you get a feel for, okay, is the market appreciating in aggregate or is it depreciating in aggregate? It's not an exact science, right? Because there are a lot of things that affect vehicle values, but it can be pretty helpful. So with that assumption, I then want to use that to set my target retail price. I also want to understand, what is my time horizon going to be? So once that car's here, once it's reconned, how long am I going to give that car to try to sell? I need to have some sort of an aging policy, especially on those cars that are what I call a good bet, right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to tie up your limited funding, your limited floor plan, in a car that's not performing for you, right? You made a good speculative play. You did it based on the information you have. They won't all be winners, right? They just won't. Some will, and the ones that are, those are the cars that you want to add to the mix. But when they aren't, it's important that you have an understanding of when you're going to cut ties with that car. Same with the reconditioning process. So you need to be making some assumptions at the point of purchasing that vehicle as to, how long is it going to take to get this car through the shop? And then what kind of money am I going to have to spend on it? This is especially important right now because what I'm hearing from dealers is that when they buy cars at auction, digitally, whatever the case may be, they're having to compromise on the condition on the vehicle right now, just because inventory is in such short supply. What this leads to is when that car gets back to your lot, it's more time in the shop, more money too. And so you need to have a good understanding of that going forward when you're making that decision. You also want to have an understanding as to what an acceptable profit target is going to be. This is where you could really hurt yourself. And so to go in saying I'm going to make $4,000 every car I buy in this market is probably tough. At the same time, you just want to have an understanding like what would be acceptable, right? What's in the equation, so to speak, as to what I expect to make, so that if I need to put my very best foot forward to keep my shelves stocked, right, what's that going to look like? You also want to have an idea as to what, especially if you're in a heavy subprime area, you have an idea as to what your lender uses for a book standpoint and what those guidelines look like. Whether it's JD Power or Black Book, you want to understand your lenders, what are they lending on average in relation to that book, and then know where those vehicles fall. And then finally, if that vehicle doesn't sell, you want to have in mind an exit strategy, in hand. A platform like ours, as an example, has a 45-day buyback. And so, we all don't expect to make money on every single car, but we want to make money on as many as we can. But when we buy the one that, we speculated on a little bit and it didn't perform well, or the market dropped or whatever the case may be, it's great to have an out. And the more you can be thoughtful about that up front, the more likely you are to see better performance there. So, and then the last point, which, we talk about often, we can't talk about it enough, but it makes your whole acquisition strategy a heck of a lot easier if you can win your trade-ins. And so you really almost can't pay enough for those cars, because when you think about the customer that you earned, what he represents or he or she represents to you is just tremendous. It's a car that you sold away from the guy down the street, so you're increasing your market share there, or at least even retaining, right, if you already have it. It's an opportunity for a trade-in and then a subsequent sale on that vehicle if it's retailable. It is an opportunity to earn income in F&I. So when you then sell that car and then as well as that trade-in, those are two incremental at least two, not to mention multiplier effects down the road of trades. Those are at least two opportunities to get F&I income. Furthermore, if you run a service operation, you hope he or she comes back and services with you. If you execute the sales process well, like we all strive to do every single day, that will lead to a happy customer, which will lead to future sales from him or her. It'll lead to referrals to their friends and family, but more importantly, it'll lead to your operation growing. And as you grow, it reduces your dependence on outside sources of inventory, like auctions and digital platforms and things of that nature. A good foundation of trades makes all the difference in the world to a used car operation. So we did a study. This was probably, well over a year. This is a dealer that was on our platform. We did just a quick study of, what if we could help them increase their appraisal win ratio by offering them an instant offer at the point of appraisal, what that could do to their business. And so this particular dealer had a 35% appraisal win ratio, was winning about 525 trades. This was annualized. They weren't an incredibly large store, not a small store. But if we could just increase an additional 5%, 10%, 15%, and you factor in the fact that that dealer may win a subsequent trade, has some odds of winning a subsequent trade on that next vehicle that's traded in and then ultimately sold, it's really shocking as you almost see this parabolic, right? Exponential is really probably the term, growth, right? As you can increase up to 60% or even higher. And I think this is what separates a lot of used car operators, is that unwillingness to lose a trade. And that's why some people are finding themselves in great inventory positions, and others have really struggled in this area. So it's an interesting thing for us to think about. It's a challenge. It's not easy in a highly competitive market to step up and pay, what's needed sometimes for these cars. But my feeling is that you almost can't pay enough. So what I want to talk about just very briefly is pricing in a market on the rise. So we took a look at some of those black book charts referenced earlier. We saw the retail pricing and the wholesale pricing and rising. And when you look at them side by side, there's something that we should just be aware of. So again, these are both indexed to the first of the year. On the left-hand side, these are your wholesale values. So these are your values at auctions and digital platforms. On the right-hand side, these are your retail prices. What I want you to notice is about week 5 is when all of a sudden wholesale values start to tick up. And they tick all the way up to about 33% based on this particular chart over what the original January 1st value was. Now, what's interesting on the retail chart is that you don't really see that retail price start to increase until week 10 or week 11. So there's a substantial lag in the retail market compared to the wholesale market. Now, and what's even more interesting is you don't see the same rate of growth. So for instance, in this particular chart, it shows that retail prices increased 20% on average. So another way to say this is that, you can't charge what you're paying, right? Well, you can't charge your retail customer what you're paying at auction or on a digital platform to buy these cars, at least not quickly. So we need to be mindful of that as we price, because what we fall victim to on occasion is we don't give ourselves a chance to make a profit. When it goes in hand with just knowing what type of market that you're in. The person you trust with your used car inventory management decision, if it's not yourself, needs to be someone that's got very keen market awareness. And when you find yourself in this type of a market, right, where it's a really rapidly increasing market, or even a moderately increasing market, those retail indices, whether it's from your appraisal tool or a book, can be very challenging because they're based on data that also lags, right? You think about the listing tool, right, where you're comparing your vehicle up against a number of listings. Well, everyone that set that price based on data in the past. And by the way, sometimes prices tend to stick if you've got somebody that's kind of asleep at the wheel and not moving prices up and down with the market. And so the challenge can be when you're in a market on the rise and the retail market's going up and the wholesale market's going up, and you plug it into your appraisal tool and it tells you to, price it here, and you price it there dead on the money day one. What happens in this particular market is you may sell it way too quickly and you may sell yourself short. So, if you sold it day one, you probably underprice it. So my recommendation to you, only when you find yourself in this type of a market, is you want to sort of, price a little bit higher than what your retail index says, right? And then when you hit a certain point in age, you dictate what that looks like for your operation, call it 30 days. Then you want to start undercutting that a little bit because you still want the vehicle to turn. You want to free up the cash, all that good stuff. But give yourself a good chance to sell that car, because if you've got a vehicle that's an in-demand car at your store, and it's the right unit, it's a core piece of inventory, it's going to sell and you're going to get what it's worth at that time. So I want to talk just very briefly on turning over your inventory routinely. And again, you'll see the retail price index chart. And so it has been, the past couple of years has been so wild in terms of the market swings. And there have been a handful of dealers that have, both done really well by hanging on to some inventory, but then a ton that have also felt the pain, right? When we were at the end of last year and we saw almost 30 consecutive weeks of wholesale value declines. And so the big thing though here is your cash and or your floor plan. And you want to make sure that you're not tying up precious resources with a car that is not likely or is not performing for you. I just keep it really, really simple. It's just not performing. And so there are times where you have to cut ties. Now, the key thing is if you get on a good solid cadence of doing this, what you'll find, and then you're constantly replenishing with your core inventory, what you'll find is you've all of a sudden got a really nice mix of core cars that you have really at any point in time. Similarly, your wins will offset your losses, because think about the guy that punts a car every 60 days, right? He did okay in this market. He did really well in this market. He did even better in this market, so on and so forth. There will be a time where he takes bite-sized losses and things like that. But most importantly, he's freeing up that cash and allocating it to a car that's going to perform better at his store. So with that, I'll give you two realities. If you think about it like this, just to really simplify the idea, imagine two $20,000 cars, one in which sold in 16 weeks and generated a profit of $2,000, and then one in which sold in 2 weeks and generated a profit of $500. So which would you rather prefer? At first glance, it's easy to say, okay, that one on the left looks really great, right? For $2,000 sold in 16 weeks, sign me up. But if you think about it, that same $20,000 you can allocate towards either car, right? If you can sell the car in 2 weeks and grab a $500 profit, hopefully grab a trade-in, hopefully grab some F&I income along the way, and then buy a similar car and sell it again in 2 weeks, and buy another similar car and sell it again in 2 weeks, you could theoretically buy 8 of these cars, generate more front-end profit and substantially more trades, substantially more F&I income, and it keeps your inventory turning and invested in the right type of inventory. So I say that to you, it's rhetorical really in nature, it's up to you, but what would you prefer? I think I know where I sit. So thank you for your time today. My name is Nick Gerlach. I'm the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer. We're going to open it up, I think, to Q&A. Nick's popping back on, but we'd love to have you come reach out and check us out. Send me an email.
Excellent presentation, Nick. As you referenced throughout it, we're certainly in unprecedented times, to say the least. Great information and best practices for no matter what the market situation might be. So again, if you do have a question for Nick Gerlach, the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer, just use the Q&A button here on the Zoom platform. And Nick, just to start us off, again, CarOffer has a lot of great intricacies in its tool, but if you could, how does CarOffer differentiate itself from other service providers in the marketplace? Or what do you bring to the table for dealerships?
Yeah, I love that question. So we call ourselves an instant trade platform. And what we are doing at the end of the day is we're brokering wholesale transactions between dealers. Our buyers and sellers, our buyers and sellers are dealers. Now, What's unique, though, about the way in which we're doing that is we provide our sellers with an instant offer. And so imagine you log into your car offer portal and you see your inventory in an inventory tab, and you've done nothing other than just log in, but you see an offer to sell that car today. And assuming that vehicle meets car for condition guidelines, you can sell the vehicle, at which point in time we'll send an inspector out to your lot, inspect it. Assuming it passes inspection, we handle all the title and payment and transportation processing, moving the car from dealer A to dealer B. It's a pretty slick process. And so the big differentiator there, similarly though, are the secret sauce, so to speak, is what we call the buying matrix. And so every dealer that comes onto our platform that's powering that instant offer, what they basically told us is a lot of the stuff that I've referenced here in this presentation. They told us, okay, here's what I want to buy. Here's what I'm wanting to pay. Here's how many of those cars that I want. And we store that in our tool. Imagine like a buy order in the stock market. If the share of Apple hits $100, I'll buy it, right? If a 2017 Kia Sorento hits auction plus $500, I'll buy it, assuming it meets your condition guidelines. And then we handle the rest from there. And so it allows a dealer that is typically spending, all day long trying to manage the used car desk, trying to manage the sales operation, dealing with the guy in the shop, handling issues with customers, handling issues with technicians, all that stuff. The guy wears about 10 hats. It allows him to replenish his used car inventory just like the new car the OEMs do. And so it's a really phenomenal tool. We've been, we've seen tremendous results, tremendous success from dealers right now. We're growing like a weed. I mean, it's just been a really, really exciting thing to be a part of. So that's the big differentiator. It is unlike anything I think that's in the market today.
And our special guest for today's webinar, Smart Strategies for Vehicle Acquisition Mid and Post-Pandemic, is Nick Gerlach, who is the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer. And Nick kind of gathered several questions that have come in from multiple attendees of a similar topic. As you well know, dealerships are seeking out consumers who are interested in selling their vehicle, not just potentially harvesting inventory from the service drive, but going out into the consumer world to buy cars that way. What's your perspective on that strategy, and how can CarOffer play a role in that as well? Evidently, there's a new tool that you all have rolled out recently that can give potential benefit.
Yeah, there is. We're really excited about it. So that's one of the things that we're passionate about is just really helping our dealer base. We believe if we can partner with dealers and become just a phenomenal tool that will stick around forever within the operation. So one of the things that was near and dear to us is we wanted to help dealers be able to provide consumers with a similar instant offer that some of the big box retailers are doing, some of the big internet used car operators, things like that, because it helps the dealers have a fighting chance, right? And so what we've done is we've allowed the dealer network to basically leverage that CarOffer instant offer and point it towards consumers in their market by placing that on their website, by placing that offer system on their website. So so far, we just launched the tool. It's got incredible steam so far. We're seeing phenomenal results, and so we're really excited, and we think it's going to really change the way that dealers buy cars more so than we already have. Right? Imagine a consumer car just showing up on your doorstep. Right? That's the vision for how this works.
Oh, that sounds exciting to say the least. Again, our guest for today's webinar is Nick Gerlach, who is the Vice President of Dealer Relations at CarOffer. And just a quick reminder that we are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a link to the recording of this session that contains all this these great best practices and recommendations and information, review at your opportunity and share with others at your store. And continuing on, Nick, certainly the main topic of today's session we'll use from the wholesale prism, but obviously Car Offer has a close relationship now with Car Gurus and the retail side of the business. If you could just touch on a couple of highlights of how the relationship with Car Gurus is beneficial to dealerships as well.
Yeah, well, we've got phenomenal partners with Car Gurus, and so that's one of the reasons that we did that deal in the first place. Is we see first phenomenal people that run that operation, and with what we were wanting to do, we knew that when we launched Car Offer, due to the just really quick success, we knew we had kind of caught lightning in a bottle, right? And so what we needed to do is we needed to scale very quickly, and Car Gurus first and foremost is helping us and helped us do that to the point we are already today. So that is the first thing I'll say. Now, secondly, though, some of it we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg on some of the stuff that we can do from an idea perspective. And some of the data that I was referencing earlier, think about like search results and things like that in your area, data that really very few platforms have access to, we now have at our fingertips. Another one of those is their instant market value. The idea that with a VIN, I can basically throw it onto their website and get a number based on real listings is incredibly valuable to a tool like ours. So the synergies are incredible, and I think what you'll find in the coming months and years is it's just as the two products become more and more ingrained, they'll continue to complement each other even further.
Excellent. Well, closing moments here on our webinar with Nick Gerlach, who is the Vice President of Dealer Relations at Car Offer. And certainly if you want more details about the company, simply just go to their website at caroffer.com. Or if you want to continue the conversation with Nick himself, his contact information is there, Nick Gerlach at caroffer.com. And Nick, to round out, as you referenced, it's amazing to think that at the beginning of the year, a $20,000 unit is now potentially nearly $27,000 to acquire that particular piece of inventory, and certainly not projecting prices to fall off a table to go back to your baseball reference, like a curveball there. But how important is it the best practices and recommendations you shared would be relevant if in fact prices do start to soften, maybe things kind of normalize, if we want to use that term, that no matter where prices might lie, those practices are important?
Yeah, I'll tell you, each one of those best practices is rooted in one thing, and that's discipline. And so at the end of the day, the thing that I see that separates the best operators from the rest is the fact that they have a disciplined strategy and they execute. And so those things are applicable in all markets. They really are. The guy that frankly has been less disciplined has been okay, because if he's holding a lot of inventory right now, but it's going to be more and more important. I don't think we're anywhere near a value decrease right now at this moment in time, like some do, just knowing what the rental car companies and their tenacious demand and in this market looks like. But that said, when that does happen, those guys will be well prepared if they're using those same strategies and remain disciplined in their approach.
Very well said. That's Nick Gerlach, Vice President of Dealer Relations at Car Offer. Nick, thank you again for the great presentation and information. And again, if you want to continue the conversation with him, the company website and his information is there on the screen. Thank you again for sharing wonderful information here on today's webinar.
Thank you, Nick. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.